The arrival of the First Fleet marked the start of an English colony in Australia, which only happened because of Cook's journey in the late 18th century. But that's the British story. Many other nations were sailing the high seas in a race to find a great southern land. And there's one first contact theory that blows all others out of the water. I'm heading to a secret location not all that far from where Captain Cook first landed. My guide is an environmentalist named Jake Cassar, who subscribes to a very radical take on history. What's more, he's going to show me the evidence. Well, this is the last place you'd expect to see Egyptian hieroglyphs, isn't it? There are so many. There's a load over here, and up here as well. Do we know what they say?
There's a story I heard from an old lady when I was a young fella growing up not far from here, and this is just local folklore, Tony. 2 Egyptian princes came out here, of course, all the way from Egypt and ended up shipwrecked. And they've made their way up the hill where one of the brothers got bitten by a snake, and this may be a representation of the snake here with the horned viper, and the 2 little birds may represent the Egyptian princes. So one of the brothers was bitten by a snake and passed away, and the other Egyptian brother lived his life out here with the local tribe. Yeah, well, there's a group out at Penrith, a tribe out in the Sydney area that apparently use a lot of Egyptian words in their language. Also in Western Australia, they say that they've got the same word for sun, Ra.
There's a criticism, isn't there, that actually the Egyptians didn't have the technology to sail boats all this way 4,000 years ago.
I've heard that, but if the Aboriginal people came over on canoes and the Maori went to the land of the long white cloud in canoes, I can't see why the Egyptians couldn't do it. I mean, they had flushable toilets a couple of thousand years before Christ.
You're very robust about this, aren't you? You believe it?
Well, if it is genuine, then it could really change history the way we know it.
He's determined to believe that it's all true, but look at me, I'm just an old English skeptic. To me, the idea that an Egyptian civilization discovered Australia 4,000 years ago is just very, very daft. But maybe what all this does demonstrate is the fact that we all yearn to have something ancient and dramatic in our lives and in our landscape. But the irony, as far as the Australians are concerned, is that they do. Look at all these. These are the marks left by Aborigines over thousands of years. That is the real, dramatic, ancient, magical story of Australia.
21st century Egyptologist Raymond Johnson believed them to reveal the burial site of Lord Nefertiru, a member of the Egyptian royal family, who died while visiting the area with his brother sometime between 2637 to 2614 BC.
Absolutely beautiful out here.
I know.
While visiting the area in 2016, Giorgio Tsoukalos met with local ancient astronaut theorist Evan Strong to get a first-hand look at these enigmatic carvings.
Wow! That's incredible. I had no idea. I mean, this looks totally different than on pictures. So what do these hieroglyphs say?
Well, at least one panel talks about 2 brothers, 2 princes, coming here from Egypt. They were shipwrecked. One of them ended up getting bitten by a snake. He then died. The theory is then he was interred here, and that's why you've got hieroglyphs here, because he died here. But there's these other walls with a mixture of symbols. This one over here, it's more of a philosophical astrophysics style thing with symbols meaning all sorts of esoteric stuff. So
now, have these symbols at all been interpreted by Egyptologists?
There've been a few, actually. A few different people have done that.
What was their reaction?
Well, Raymond Johnson was one of the first people to come here and translate. He actually sent some of his translations off to the Cairo Library, and Dr. Abu Dia-Ghazi ended up saying, yep, you're on the right track. Something called Proto-Egyptian.
And how old do you reckon these are?
We're thinking, because of their prevalence at least in one panel of Proto-Egyptian, that it's about 4,600 years old.
Wow. Are there any hieroglyphs that stand out to you?
Yeah, definitely. Follow me down here, and I'll show you this other one. So this one here, we call the UFO glyph, and people have called that since they've been coming here, because it kind of looks like a UFO.
Yeah, it definitely has the classic UFO shape. It's got the rays, or whatever you want to call it. What would you suggest if anyone says, well, this is not a UFO, it's some other symbol, but certainly not that?
I think someone suggested it's jewelry, but it's a completely different symbol that's upside down, and it really doesn't quite fit in. It's one of those symbols here that doesn't fit into the canon.
In your opinion, why do you think the Egyptians made it all the way to Australia?
I think they were looking for esoteric wisdom, definitely.
From the Aboriginals.
Yes.
This is the Sphinx Memorial in the Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park here in Sydney.
This was created by Private Shirley in the 1930s, so we want to use this as an example to compare with the so-called ancient Egyptian Gosford glyphs in nearby Woy Woy. And we'd like to start firstly by comparing the lichen growth on the natural stone, as we can see, and then comparing it to the stone which we know has been carved and we can accurately date to the 1930s. Also, we'd like to look at the altar, and we can see the softness of the Sydney sandstone and see how it's worn compared to the grout. As an example, as to the weathering patterns that occur over time here. It's quite a soft stone.
So I'll just try and point it out. You can actually see the undulation going up to how the grout's actually held it's sort of stronger than the stone, so to speak, as people have gone and stood at that altar there.
Okay, if we move up towards the altar here, we can start to see some of the lichen types of growth, especially this yellowish white lichen. Now, especially in Sydney, it's quite a large industry is lichen removal. It grows very fast, and it can do quite a bit of damage to roofs, to brick, to tiles, and all sorts of masonry. This is not a difficult to research topic. It's anyone with local knowledge will understand just what a problem it is, especially in the shaded wet spots. And we'd also like to note the style of the carving, which is at best amateurish or primitive, almost childish in a way.
So a further look here at the style as we go around. Again, the style around mainly the three sides. There's none on that side really. So the three sides of the altar here, and the top of it has some carving in it as well.
If we start moving, first we'll have a close-up look at some natural stone, which we can assume has been untouched and unshaped. So we can assume that this is thousands of years of moss and lichen growth. And we can also, the weathering patterns, also lichen causes acidification. So for one thing, the roots will grow into the cracks, expand them, and cause the stone to erode. And the acid, which is given off by the lichen, also accelerates erosion of this very soft Sydney sandstone. And now as we move towards the Sphinx, we can see the rear of the Sphinx. We know that this has been shaped clearly, and we can see, and we can date this to the period of the 1930s when Private Shirley from the nearby hospital came here to carve this over a period of about 1.5 years.
Through the trees we can see the Pacific Ocean there in the middle of the shot. Coming back, we're in Kariong here north of Sydney, and we're coming around to the glyphs here known as the Gosford Glyphs. So just having a bit of a pan around and get up through the hole here. We've got glyphs going right up the side here, and then coming down the side here. I'm panning fast, but anyway they're all here. So what we're going to do is talk about the lichen. That's what we're doing on this video, so we'll just talk about that.
Yeah, but we'll start with pointing out, we'll start with this glyph here. Now we can see the very same type of lichen as we pointed out at the War Memorial in Turramurra. As opposed to that memorial, we can see that the edges are still very sharp, and that there has been relatively little weathering in comparison. As we pointed out at the Turramurra War Memorial, we can date that to the 1930s, and as a comparison with the lichen damage, weathering damage, and with the sharp edges, I think it's more than reasonable to say that these are clearly not they must have come afterwards because of just simply the clarity of the sharpness and depth of the carving.
Within the wall here, just to point out this part, for example, you can see that whoever's put this in has tapered it where it's wider here, and it gets, because the rock, just because of the shape of the rock, which tells you that the rock was already broken or eroded away before the artist put it in. They didn't plan really very well. It just doesn't speak of a sophistication to me at all, and you have to wonder when it's just a complete and utter joke. And if we look up here to this figure also, what can I say? Just lack of, you know, the spiral here, the geometry of it's just very poor. I'll just point out that up this end we have the Anubis character, who to me looks a bit different. Just the style of it, the way it's cut into the rock looks different to the rest of the glyphs from my perspective. Kind of sits in its own little area here as well, so I think it's a separate one, but there would have been multiple visitors here, and in this case perhaps another artist putting this one in. So we'll just point something else out here.
Okay, so at this point I'll talk about the Theosophical Society and put that in context with the War Memorial Sphinx in Turramurra, which again was built in the 1930s at a point where the Theosophical Society in Australia and across much of the Western world was of huge influence. Groups, esoteric groups, use and could still use, but especially back in that time, were very much into ancient Egypt and the symbology and the, if you might say, the magical aspects of it. And that war memorial being built at a time when that was of huge significance, and also Private Shirley, who constructed the war memorial in Turramurra, was part of the Australian Expeditionary Force, which spent time in Egypt, and so the Egyptian influence was brought back very heavily in Australia, and we can see that in many other sites, but especially to do with war memorials such as obelisks. We see there's, you know, every third town in Australia probably has an obelisk-style war memorial, and
At least.
yes, and so we can sort of make a fair assumption, knowing that this particular site is dated no less than 1950. We have it 29 kilometres as the crow flies from the war memorial in Turramurra. They're both basically equidistant from the ocean, and they share the same ecology and environment. So the lichens here, the rainfall, the weather patterns, the plants and animals are all essentially identical. And yet this is apparently 3,000 years old, but much less weathered, much less damaged, as compared to the war memorial that we have in Turramurra. And it's very hard to, even with a very open mind, to accept that these are anything but modern. I wouldn't call them hoax or forgeries. I just, you know, they're what, you know, graffiti, if you want to call it. I don't think even the people who were carving it genuinely believed that this would fool any scholar or any of the soldiers who moved in Egypt or the Theosophical Society in themselves. Australia was quite involved in it. The Path was a magazine produced by the Theosophical Society that was published out of Sydney, and we had people such as the American architect Claude Bragdon was a contributor. He also wrote the foreword for Ouspensky's work, and he was also a friend, colleague and inspiration to the Burley Griffins, who themselves were members of the Theosophical Society, and they were also the architects responsible for the design of our capital city of Canberra, which is very similar to Washington, and is that it's full of esoteric monuments, geometry, design, and I don't think there's really much else you can add to that. We also know that in the early 1990s, someone was actually caught adding to these glyphs and was caught by a National Parks inspector and was charged. That's on record with Gosford Police. And the Anubis character, we have the original paper clippings from, I can't remember the exact date offhand, it's the very late 70s or early 80s, and the original picture shows where it's freshly marked, where the light soft colour in the scratches is visible against the dark of the stone.
Down in this hole here, there are claims of it being some sort of tomb or something or other, and I've taken a photograph, and you're looking at the photograph right now. And what we're going to do is, this hole's sort of above the glyph area here, so we're going to go around, and then we've got the glyphs down here. So what I'm going to do is just go down here quickly, and down the bottom, we can have a look at another place that is kind of similar in a way. So you come up through here, but if you have a look through here, and if you have a look at the stone, it looks like, you know, it's quite impressive in a way, the way it's shaped. You could say, oh, it's carved and all that sort of thing. Here's another shot. I'm a bit further into this cavern here, and you can sort of see some of the rock detail in here.
So we just have a bit of stone that's already been broken off. This is just
All right, so this is how fragile the stone is around here. Yeah, yeah, look at that.
Wind and water would just...
Yeah.
This is just...
Just down the bottom of the glyphs here, and there's a very fresh mark that somebody's cut into the stone. And we have this letter R here, and if you look at it already, it's been there, it's already kind of fading into the, becoming part of the rock. Like the glyphs, it's starting to sort of become less clear. I seem to remember seeing this, I've been here before, and it was more clearer, I think. But anyway, there it is right now, and in a way it looks like it's kind of becoming a bit more faded with the rock, maybe even a bit of lichen and all the rest of it. Here in Kariong, just around the area here, the way the rocks erode, and there's a good example of it right here with this eroding cavity. Different sort of textures to the rock and a bit of weirdness to the rock. By the way, on the rock here there are all sorts of holes, Aboriginal old markings, circles and bits and pieces, but just here, just looking at the weirdness, I guess, the way the rock can change, and looking at the kind of weirdness here and the way it'll kind of come up, and it's, nice kind of smooth contour coming along this way, which is quite neat how the tree has formed here on the rock. But back to business, here is another one of these kind of formations within the rock, and here also these scooped up bits, although the rock's kind of melted there in a way. So that's the nature of the rock around this area. Here again we see this kind of plot mark, like melting here and melting here, and you can see just a bit of a close-up, the kind of ridges in there and all the rest of it. It's just the way the rock is around here. Here's one of those Aboriginal holes, and another here, well eroded, very rounded, very old. Here's another one up here. All through here the circles and the markings Aboriginal within the rocks. There's a fish up here. We're a wee way up above the glyphs here in Kariong, and just up here more of this rock, this scooped fashion that the rock around here can assume. Okay, so just above the glyphs here in Gosford is this rock with this formation in here, and some people have sort of insinuated or basically stated maybe that basically this is like an embalming table of some sort, but if we have a look in here, you can see that, well, if it was sort of sculpted and shaped to the way they wanted to shape it using some sort of melting the rock technique, why would you keep this big chunk in here like so? Now this aspect to the rock, this kind of sculpt of the rock, and it is quite an impressive one, but we can see it elsewhere. So what I'm going to do right now is we're simply going to pop through to this rock right here, which is say 20-25 meters away, and have a look at the rock right there. Okay, so there's that formation right there, and coming through the bush just right here, and we can see further formation. Now, if this was the Egyptians sculpting this, then why is it that we can find a similar sort of sculpt, if you will, melted rock formation right here also? So similar kind of scoop, and again you've got that rock in there, quite an impressive sort of formation within the rock here. The one up above over there, sure, is more kind of impressive, but to go and say that it is a something that's sculpted out of the rock by humans is stretching it, when all you have to do is walk around here and you can find further so-called sculpting. On here, by the way, you've got the ubiquitous Aboriginal carvings into the rock. Again, there is that formation in the rock, the so-called embalming table, as some people might describe it, and then we come over here and we look in the rock and we can see this formation in the rock also. That also is quite impressive, the way it's, so-called supposedly melted and all the rest of it. Beautiful day. Yet again, there's that formation, and if you have a look at it, you can kind of see that kind of reddish iron, perhaps nature to the stone, iron ore. Within here also we can see another kind of rounded, smooth thing, and it's kind of all covered over, but basically you have a similar formation in here. This is a view from above. Now the glyphs would be, you actually crawl down here into the glyph area, and that's that hole, and some people allege that it's, I don't know, some sort of tomb or whatever. But more importantly, let's have a look at this tree here and just look at the way that it's put this part down onto the rock here, kind of stabilising it as it does its thing over the rocks.